It never starts with who you are. It starts with what you represent. She looks at you, not through the eyes of knowing, but through the lens of longing. There's a flicker in her eyes. Maybe it feels like admiration. Maybe it feels like hope. But beneath that glow, there's something else. A measurement, a calculation. She's not seeing you. She's seeing what you might become if molded, shaped, and directed into the version she's already written in her mind. And the tragedy? You want to be that man. You welcome the mask, not realizing it's tightening over your real face. Because it feels good to be desired, to be wanted, to be seen. But this isn't being seen. This is being cast. You're the actor. She's the director. And the script. Written long ago, somewhere between her first heartbreak and her last unmet need. Carl Jung didn't whisper about this. He didn't package it in self-help jargon. He delivered it with the blade of depth psychology, a scalpel slicing through illusion. He called it projection. Every woman, Jung observed, carries within her an image of the masculine, an unconscious archetype called the animus. And when this animus is undeveloped, it isn't a guide, it's a dictator. It becomes the force that pushes her toward chaos, not clarity, toward domination, not dialogue. She believes she's in love, but what she's really doing is casting roles in the film, playing inside her head. You think she picked you, but what she picked was the silhouette of a man who never truly existed, a shadow of what her unconscious mind wanted to heal or conquer. And here's the cruel twist. When you stop fitting the fantasy, when your lines go off script, she won't rewrite the story. She'll replace the actor. Not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped being the mirror she needed. This isn't about her being evil. This is about you being unconscious. Because while she's projecting, you're performing. You confuse attention with intimacy. You think being chosen is the same as being known. You think her excitement means you're seen, when in truth, you're useful. And usefulness is the most temporary form of love. So here's the truth Jung handed men like a cold glass of water. As long as you remain a stranger to yourself, you will keep falling in love with the women who are strangers to themselves. And the end is always the same. One day the lights go out. The script runs out. The illusion collapses. And you're left wondering, what happened? But the real question isn't what happened to you. It's what happened to the version of you she invented, and why you tried so hard to become it. Because when you wear the mask long enough, you start to forget who you were before the stage. You don't become a man by being chosen. You become a man when you choose yourself. Jung saw it before most men even dared to look. This quiet, invisible war waged beneath the skin of relationship. A war not of bodies, but of images. He spoke of the animus, the masculine spirit within every woman, as a force that could either lead to awakening or descent into unconscious tyranny. When left unchecked, the animus doesn't guide. It commands, it criticizes, it judges without mercy. And the modern man? He becomes its reflection. Not in strength, but in obedience. You think you're being noble when you bend to her moods. You think you're earning her love when you silence your boundaries. You think you're showing commitment when you make yourself emotionally available on demand. But Jung would call it something far more dangerous: self-betrayal. You are betraying yourself, not for her sake, but for the illusion of being enough. Because you've been trained to think that masculinity must be earned through female approval. That being loved means being chosen. That being good means being agreeable. That being strong means being soft. But here's the paradox Jung revealed. The more predictable you are, the less desirable you become. The more obedient you are, the less she respects you. The more available you are, the more she pulls away. And it confuses you, because no one told you that the feminine is not drawn to safety. It is drawn to the mystery, the untamable. The man who cannot be fully understood or controlled. You believe that revealing every part of yourself will make her stay. But in doing so, you erase your edge. You become soft clay, moldable, agreeable, forgettable. And that's when you vanish, not from her life, but from her desire. What's left is not a man, but a mask. a smiling, nodding, half-alive echo of the self you abandoned to be loved. And she will feel it, even if she can't explain it. Women sense inauthenticity like wolves smell fear. Even if she once begged you for more vulnerability, once you give it all, the attraction withers. Not because you gave too much, but because what you gave came from a place of fear, not wholeness. You gave because you didn't believe in your right to stand alone. You gave because you believed you needed to earn your place. And that's when the feminine withdraws. Not as punishment, but as instinct. Jung's work pointed to this terrible contradiction, that the very thing a man does to keep her, sacrificing his center, is the very thing that makes her leave. Not physically, perhaps, but emotionally, energetically, spiritually. She retreats the moment she senses that the man beside her is no longer anchored in himself, but drifting in the tides of her expectations. And you keep wondering what went wrong. You replay every conversation, every silence, every sigh. You look for the flaw, the moment, the phrase that ruined it all. But there was no moment. There was only the slow erosion of your selfhood. And this, Jung taught, is the beginning of freedom. Not when you blame her, but when you see that you volunteered. You volunteered to wear the mask. You volunteered to shrink your voice. You volunteered to play the fool, because you believed that being wanted was safer than being real. But reality doesn't apologize, and truth doesn't beg to be loved. Carl Jung didn't offer comfort. He offered something far more terrifying, the truth. And the truth is this: you've spent your life chasing approval, not because you're weak, but because somewhere along the way, you were taught to confuse. Being liked with being worthy, you learned to adapt, to shift, to become whoever they needed you to be, a protector, a performer, a provider. And somewhere in that performance, you disappeared. This is why Jung's concept of individuation is so threatening, because it demands you stop pretending. It calls you to something deeper, to peel away every mask, every identity, every ego-driven role, and face the question you've spent your entire life avoiding. Who are you when no one is watching? Not when she's validating you, not when your friends are praising you, not when society rewards you for playing the part, but when you are alone, absolutely, terrifyingly alone. That's where the real work begins. Individuation isn't just healing, it's burning. It's letting every version of yourself that was built to be liked die. The pleaser dies, the puppet dies, the nice guy who lives to be accepted by women, he dies screaming, because he never actually lived. He was a performance. And in that funeral of the false self, something ancient and real stirs. Not the man society told you to be, not the caricature women projected onto you, but the authentic masculine, not defined by dominance, but by depth, not fueled by approval, but by alignment. This is not the path of alpha males. This is the path of men who walk into their own unconscious, unarmed and unafraid, and face the parts of themselves they hoped no one would ever see. The weak part, the envious part, the wounded boy who still aches for mother's approval through a lover's praise. Jung called it the shadow, and until you confront it, you will remain controlled by it, because everything you hide owns you. Everything you refuse to face dictates your behavior in ways you cannot see. And so you keep trying to be enough, trying to be lovable, trying to become the man she dreams about. But here's what no one tells you. You will never be enough for a fantasy, because fantasies don't need real men. They need characters, they need scripts, they need performances. And the moment you stop performing, you're no longer useful. That's why it ends. That's why she turns cold. That's why the magic dies. Not because you failed, but because you finally told the truth. You showed who you are. And in doing so, you interrupted the illusion. It's not your fault she was possessed by a story, but it's your responsibility that you auditioned for a role in it. And here's the razor-edged truth Jung left us. You cannot be free until you're willing to be alone, not temporarily, not as a tactic to win her back, but truly alone. No texts, no chasing, no posturing, just silence, stillness, solitude. It is in that terrifying solitude that the real man is born, not through applause but through confrontation, not by being chosen but by choosing yourself. You stop being a boy seeking approval and become a man grounded in his own presence. And once that happens, you no longer chase, you no longer perform, you no longer beg. You stand, fully, quietly, powerfully, and the world begins to feel that presence like a shift in the wind, something ancient, unmoved, and utterly uninterested in being liked. The moment you stop performing, the world begins to shift, subtly at first. People who once praised you now seem uneasy around you. Women who once clung to your every word begin to pull back. Friends no longer know what to say to the version of you that isn't wearing a smile to be accepted. Why? Because you've become a mirror, and mirrors make people uncomfortable. Carl Jung warned that the individuated man, the man who has walked through his own darkness and made peace with it, is not welcomed by society. He is feared. He is misunderstood. He is labeled as cold, arrogant, difficult, but the truth is more dangerous than that. He cannot be controlled. You've stepped off the stage. You've stopped dancing to someone else's music. And those who built their power on your compliance, they begin to resent you, especially the ones who once claimed to love you, because what they loved wasn't you. It was the version of you that made them feel safe, adored, worshipped, validated. You didn't betray them by changing. You betrayed their fantasy by becoming real. And the deeper irony, the very things that once drew them to you, your softness, your vulnerability, your willingness to adapt, now become the reasons they withdraw. They say you're distant. They say you're unavailable. They say you've changed. But what they're really saying is, I can't mold you anymore. You are no longer the clay, you are now the stone. Still grounded, unmoved by approval or rejection. And in that transformation, a new kind of loneliness arrives. A deeper kind. Not because you are unloved, but because you are no longer needed in the way you used to be. You no longer exist to make others feel complete. And yet, in that loneliness, you discover something holy. You discover that your value never came from their eyes. It was yours all along. The real you, the one you buried under charm, approval, compromise, rises. He is quieter than the boy you were. Less eager to impress, less inclined to explain himself, but he is solid. And that solidity, it changes what you attract. You no longer call in women who want a savior. You no longer invite those still possessed by the fantasy of the perfect man. Instead, you begin to draw in those who have faced their own illusions. Women who've met their shadow, who've burned their projections, who don't need you to play a part. And when you meet her, the real her, not the one hiding behind worship or manipulation, something profound happens. She doesn't demand. She doesn't seduce with desperation. She doesn't try to tame your wildness or soften your edge. She meets you as an equal, not because she needs you to make her whole, but because she is already whole. You'll know it the moment it happens. She won't flood you with fantasy. She won't praise you like a prize. She'll simply stand there, real, raw and rooted in her own soul. And that's when you'll feel it. Love that isn't born of need. Love that doesn't require you to disappear. Love that allows you to remain fully yourself. It is the rarest kind of love. And most men never experience it, because most men never become the kind of man who can receive it. Let's not sugarcoat this. Most men will never get here. Most will settle for the illusion. They'll settle for being wanted, even if it means never being known. They'll settle for approval over authenticity, fantasy over truth, performance over presence. Because to wake up from the role is to face the void, and the void is terrifying. It's that quiet space where no one applauds, where no woman texts you back, where no likes, no admiration, no attention comes to patch the holes in your worth. It's just you, your silence, your scars, your truth. But that is where manhood begins. Not in domination, not in being alpha, not in controlling others, but in becoming fully responsible for the inner world you've spent your life avoiding. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And nowhere is that more true than in romantic relationships. Because when you don't know who you are, you cling to someone else to give you meaning. You call her your light, your muse, your reason to live. But the hard truth, that's not love. That's possession. You've made her the carrier of your soul, so you never have to carry it yourself. And when she drops it, when she leaves, when she pulls back and says, "I can't do this anymore," you feel betrayed. But you should feel grateful, because in that moment you finally meet the truth you've been running from. This was never her job. She was never meant to complete you. She was never meant to define you. She was never meant to carry the burden of your unlived life. That burden, it was always yours. And when you take it back, when you stop blaming her, when you stop waiting to be chosen, something shifts. You begin the real work, the inner excavation, the sacred dismantling of every identity you built to survive. And in the ashes of that breakdown, a man emerges, a man who no longer seeks to be loved as a performance, a man who no longer waits for validation like a starving child, a man who has chosen himself, not with ego, but with reverence. He no longer says, "What do I need to become so she'll stay?" He says, "Who am I when no one stays?" And from that question, power is born, not power over others, but power over the only kingdom that ever mattered, the kingdom within. That man. He doesn't manipulate. He doesn't beg. He doesn't perform. He attracts, not through charm, but through clarity. He loves, not from hunger, but from wholeness. He connects, not through fantasy, but through truth. And the woman who walks beside him, she doesn't worship him, she doesn't complete him. She meets him as an equal, as a partner, as a soul who has walked through her own fire and emerged whole. That's what Jung knew. Real love doesn't complete you. It reveals you. And most people will run from that revelation. But a few, a rare, courageous few, will stand in it. And in that moment, there are no masks, no performances, no roles, just two humans, no longer asleep, no longer pretending, just real, raw, free. And that sacred, brutal, beautiful freedom is the only love worth having. If this message stirred something in you, don't let it fade into the noise like this video so others can find it. Share it with a brother who's still wearing the mask. Comment below with the moment that hit you hardest. And subscribe if you're ready to stop performing and start becoming. Together, let's wake up, one man at a time.